Over 500 agencies were surveyed. Agencies from around the world with different specialties. Marketing, creative, web development, and PR agencies included. Agencies of all sizes, from those with less than 10 to those with more than 500 employees. The team here at teamwork.com recently partnered with Audience Audit, a research agency who focuses on this sort of analysis for agencies themselves, to take on an extensive analysis of the state of agency operations in 2023. By tapping our network of customers, our partners' networks, and conducting outreach to hundreds of agencies in partnership with Audience Audit, we've packaged up all of this research for you. In the State of Agency Operations Report 2023 edition, that is, you'll find insights into how you as an agency leader and your firm benchmark against your peers in some key areas, such as client churn, time tracking effectiveness, billable utilization rates, overservicing clients, and your approach to new AI tools. This week, we brought 3 panelists on to the Agency Life monthly livestream series to discuss some of the key findings in a roundtable discussion that was really fun. Each panelist is a current agency owner or advisor, and they had some really solid insights to share. For instance, Gray McKenzie from ZenPilot pushed back on a common view on overservicing clients. Nicole Pereira from Culturist dropped an insightful analogy about client satisfaction that may or may not have involved a fruit salad reference. And Susan Beyer, founder of Audience Audit, shared the 3 distinct segments that emerged from this research into the day-to-day of agency leaders. Hint, these 3 segments have nothing to do with the age or size of your agency. So if you weren't able to make the live stream and attend live, you didn't know we ran those, or you just love consuming your agency life content via audio, we wanted to make sure that you didn't miss these insights. With that being said, in today's episode, we'll be sharing the audio replay from this week's live stream discussing this in-depth and comprehensive report on the state of agency operations. As I'm sure you're probably thinking, if you want to get a copy of the full report, you can find that easily in the description of this episode. And if you have questions for the team here or the panelists based on what they share in this conversation, they share their contact info at the end of the conversation. We'll link those in the description as well. We hope you enjoyed this conversation. Those who attended live sure chimed in with some great questions and takeaways. So without further ado, let me introduce you to our 3 panelists today. So we've got Gray McKenzie, co-founder of ZenPilot, Susan Beyer, founder of Audience Audit, our key partner in the research report that we conducted to develop the State of Agency Operations report, the 2023 version. I think you're going to see more of this from us at teamwork.com as time goes on. Myself moderating the discussion. And last but certainly not least, Nicole Pereira, founder of Culturish and active agency owner at Remotish as well. Gray, let's start with you. Just a quick intro of yourself before we get into the content today.
Yeah, for sure. Like I said, my name is Gray McKenzie. I am a co-founder of this little company called ZenPilot, and we have helped thousands of agencies streamline their operations, get project management right, and really nail kind of the combination or the interplay. And we'll talk about this, I'm sure, today, of how do we get the right tools in place, how do we get the right habits for our team, and how do we use the right processes that our team employs to make sure our team is executing and work the right and best way every time.
Very well said. I think the number's up to something like 2,700 agencies you guys have consulted with, which comes from your expertise and you and your co-founder having an agency. So we share that background between you guys and teamwork.com. Susan, over to you for folks who aren't familiar with you just yet.
Thanks, Logan. As you said, yes, we are an agency, a research agency. Our clients are agencies, and we also do a lot of research for agencies around with agency clients, agency leaders, sort of understanding the challenges of running a profitable agency. Really happy to be here.
Yes, absolutely. And another repeat guest on this series, Nicole Pereira. Nicole, over to you.
Yeah, so I spent a decade as a consultant and the last decade owning various agencies. Right now, I own 2 agency-like companies, and one of them is a very niche technical implementation partner for a platform called HubSpot, and the other consults with other agencies on their agency operations. And so I'm a real battle-hardened individual, and I'm excited to sort of share some perspective with my fellow agency leaders here.
Battle-hardened agency owner. We've heard the term recovering agency owners from our CEO, Peter Coppinger, and Clodagh Higgins, I think, that mentioned that on this series before. So I think there's a lot of folks that can identify with that. What is the agenda today? We're going to set the scene on why we wanted to endeavor into this research report and this effort. Introduce you 3 agency segments, one unique thing about both the report and the research that went into it. We've got 3 different segments of agency owners and agency leaders, but not by your typical demographics, not by just size of agency. We'll have Susan introduce those in a bit. And then we're going to break down each of the 4 key insights from the report that we want to discuss and then get to that Q&A. So as we go, if you have specific questions in each of these sections as the panelists are speaking, please feel free, drop your questions in there. So let's get to setting the stage. So if you're feeling a little bit like this, trying to take a deep breath as there is fire and explosions and things like that going around you, first we want to let you know you're not alone. The landscape in 2023 has definitely been bumpy. We've seen restricted client budgets, potential recession, ongoing recession, depends on who you listen to, ongoing inflation, competition for both clients and for talent, that I think we're seeing pressure from both sides there, as our panelists will speak to. And so we want to arm you with insights and advice coming from the collective group of peers. And so there were a lot of agencies that contributed to the survey that then turned into this report. So we've let that gift play just enough now. So we want to get you into what was this research that generated the State of Agency Operations report that we're going to be breaking down today. It will be available for full download. We'll drop that in the chat in a bit. But Susan, as we mentioned at the top, your agency, Audience Audit, really were the drivers in partnering with us at teamwork.com to undergo some pretty massive research. So give us a high-level overview of how it was done, who contributed, and then we'll get into some of the insights.
You bet. Well, as you said, Logan, this is a really robust study. We have over 500 agency leaders, management roles, all the way up to founders and owners, U.S. and outside the U.S. Lots of different kinds of agencies, lots of different sizes of agencies, from fewer than 10 employees. We have some that are over 1,000 employees in this. 1 in 4 of these respondents are owners or founders. Most of these folks have agencies that are sizable, and 68% of them have been in business for over 10 years. So a really experienced group. If this is a quantitative study, the statistical reliability on it is really strong. So everybody who's watching and listening and going to read the report, know that this is something you can actually look at as some reliable data to run your agency.
We wanted to give a different angle to folks to identify 3 different segments of the agency leaders that contributed to this. Let me find my mouse for 1 second. It's frozen on me. Okay, there we go. Apparently the magic mouse died. So I'm going to stop talking and I'm going to let Susan introduce the 3 segments. Sorry for that, you guys. Beauty of live streaming. So talk to us about the 3 segments and how it's a little bit different than often research reports that dissect based on just kind of the demographics and the numbers.
Thank you, Logan. We're all used to seeing things that are about small agencies or big agencies, or based on revenue, or based on the type of work they're doing. These segments are different. These are about mindset. These are about how agency owners and leaders are feeling about things. And this is mathematical, guys. These are not buckets we predetermined. We asked them a whole bunch of questions and off we go. And we ended up with 3 sort of very different types of mindsets among agency leaders. The first group is overwhelmed, and that's 39%. These folks are really struggling with a lot of challenges in their agency. And unfortunately, their processes and their systems are not holding up. They have disconnected stuff in their tech stack, and they really have a hard time getting done what they want to do. Challenges with staffing, challenges with tech updates, client expectations, you name it. These folks are struggling with it. The second group, 32%, we call aspiring. These folks have a lot of challenges too, but unlike the overwhelmed, they really feel positive about their ability to tackle them. So they're looking for tools, processes, advice, guidance But they have a lot of optimism around this. And then the confident, which is 29%, firing on all cylinders. They say that everything is working really well operationally in their agency. They feel really good about the vendors that are providing them services, that the fact that they understand agencies, their systems are integrated and working well together, and their teams are empowered and actively working in their tech stack and coordinating with clients. So they're really doing very well. One of the interesting things about this is that these agencies, for the most part, don't look any different. We've got them across the size distribution. We've got all sorts of things going on that show that can't really see this on paper for the most part. It is worthwhile knowing that aspiring group that we're going to talk about in the middle there, they are more likely to have 50 or fewer employees. They are more likely to be owners of their agencies, and they are more likely to be women. 64% of these owners are women, which is almost, it's about 20 points higher than we see in either of the other groups. This aspiring group in particular is spread pretty thin too with respect to their responsibilities. And you'll see some of that come out in the data in the study. And then the overwhelmed, only a third of those even have an in-house chief ops officer or an ops lead. So that's maybe part of the reason they're having a tough time.
Yeah, I think there's at least one conclusion we can draw from that. I love this breakdown, and what we want to know from everyone here is which one do you think that you are? Drop us a quick note: A for overwhelmed, B for aspiring, and C for confident. In the chat today, would love to see kind of how that compares with the group that we've got here live. So A for overwhelmed, B for aspiring, and C for confident. And if you type out the word, then more power to you. We'll kind of round that up. That will be a really interesting data point. And I appreciate you breaking down some of the demographics that are interesting there as well, Susan. Let's jump into the roundtable discussion from there. I see lots of votes coming in.
Yeah.
Keep dropping those in, everybody. I think it's really interesting that Susan pointed out, they do not necessarily correlate with size. The folks who have quote unquote arrived and have the agency of 100 people or whatever, benchmark that is in your mind, doesn't necessarily mean those are the folks that are always confident. We've got them spread across different sizes of agencies and types of agencies. So, as we look at some of the challenges that might be leading at least some of us to being feeling overwhelmed, a couple of stats that surfaced from the report we want to discuss here. We're seeing increasing pressure from clients, 75%. If you look at those top, those top two, or excuse me, the bottom four. Man, my mouse being off has totally thrown me off, you guys. I'll get into a rhythm, I promise. 75% of agencies have lost clients in the first half of the year. 44% are saying that client expectations, meeting those have become more challenging. And we'll talk about in a bit. Burnout is really on the rise. Nicole, as you mentioned, being the hardened agency owner, I'd love to kick it over to you to talk about this. What jumps off the page for you when we talk about these increasing pressures for agency owners?
No, it's tough. I think agency life, hashtag agency life, is a real thing. It's been a real thing, but it's interesting because historically, I've always felt it's been like an internal thing, right? It's like been expectations of your boss, or it's been expectations of the business owner, or the grind of being excellent in your field was a pressure of its own. I don't think historically I've felt, or my peers that I've talked to, because I network a lot, have felt so much pressure from the outside at such extreme levels, right? I think the macroeconomics are really starting to show their true colors right now. And I think, it's interesting. I think I feel fit the overwhelmed group, maybe not for my systems and processes, but for client related items, talent related items. The empathy I have for seeing my clients struggle, my peers struggle, and what historically I think we as owners, we could just ride it out, right? Like 6 months, we could ride it out to the other side. This is a whole lot longer than 6 months right now. And so for me, that puts me sort of in that overwhelmed category because I'm like, I don't see an end to some of the stressors that are happening right now. And so it's really sad to see 75% or the number that you test out there, should have wrote that down, of my peers
Mhm.
saying they're losing clients. And I have to think they're saying this because they're losing clients and not filling it at the same rate. I think a lot of times when we have turnover, but we're filling our client load back up, that doesn't feel like
Mm,
a loss, right? Natural
mhm.
turnover is a good thing. Right now, I think some of us are feeling a little bit at a loss. And I don't know, Gray, if that's something that you've been experiencing, because I know you see it from the other side consulting with so many agencies. I see it from my peers as a networker.
Yeah, I think you hit the two like big things that I was going to bring out is guess what? Agency life, there should be client turnover. We're not partnered up
Mhm.
forever. Few and far between are the 5-year, retainer clients. And if you've got, I commonly have this conversation with agency owners, and they're so proud of the fact that they've had the same client set for 8 years. And then you look at that and look at their profitability, and there's almost no profit in the business. Like, well, there's a reason that they're still with you. Because you're still useful at this inexpensive budget. But when you start raising your prices and maturing, like all businesses should, guess what? Not all your clients are going to want to continue to pay those prices. So I think you're absolutely right that, like, are we in control of this? And the difference between someone who's answering with a more confident level is someone who's more in control of turnover and they're dictating some of those terms. And the overwhelming nature of this can be when we don't have control. And there's certainly,
Mhm.
like you said, the macroeconomic factors that can create out of control, even in folks who have their systems and processes together. Hey, guess what? If you're in B2B SaaS, like it's been a tough space valuation wise over the last year. And so a lot of those agencies have gotten cut or significantly reduced spend as a result of that.
Mhm.
So I think you get that piece. And then you said the other important piece, which is your pipeline. Kind of what's your positioning? How do you still deserve some kind of premium in the market to take on clients at the rates that you want to charge? So I think that's crucial for everyone. Is even you should have some natural turnover and attrition of clients. You should be graduating folks out of your program, and you should also have a pipeline to replace folks. So I don't know, Susan, if that lines up or if you've got a different take on what that
Yeah,
looks
it absolutely does. I mean, what we're seeing with our agency clients and our agency colleagues sort of represents even a shadow chart to this, which is clients who have not technically left, but
Mm,
they are slow to sign. They are slow to get started on projects once they do sign. So I think this is even more dramatic. And, on the client side of things, 44% of the leaders in this study strongly agree that client expectations have become harder to meet. So, you know, agencies are sort of stuck in this situation where the bar is getting higher for performance, and we're also struggling with losing clients or projects slowing down or kind of getting pinched and stuff like that. So I agree with what you said. I mean, this is an industry wide problem. I think the more you're out there um, differentiating your agency and making sure that your systems inside are working well, the better off you're going to be.
I love that you called out both of those, Susan, and it kinda, springboarded off of something that Gray mentioned is that I think that when we look at client retention, when we look at churn, like, one, let's not fool ourselves that if we're just retaining them forever, that's always a good thing. We gotta look at the profitability. But let's, not think that we should retain everyone forever. And it's there are operational things you can do to improve your service, but as you both touched on, it's also about your positioning. Can you demand that premium or even just the rate that you have been charging? How are you differentiated, right? We just came back from inbound. Most of us in the HubSpot ecosystem know there are 6,000 HubSpot solution partners. If you're just saying, "Hey, we're the best at delivering HubSpot," one thing I heard from Pete Caputa and Nick Bennett, who was formerly at Impact and now helping agencies with their positioning. He said so many agencies try to market the solution and convince their clients that they're the best. Instead, they need to be marketing the problem that they solve, and then they become the default solution. So we're not going to dive deep into marketing and positioning here, but once I heard that line, I could not unhear it. And I think it's interesting that we touch on that here, that operations as well as positioning does play into meeting client expectations. Um, One of the other things that we saw here is that burnout is really on the rise. Agency leaders who are working more than 40 hours a week are definitely in the majority. Gray, any thoughts on this one in the agencies you guys are talking to?
I think so much of being able to be successful, probably in any business, but certainly in client services, because that's the world that we're all in, is how well can we manage and maintain our emotions through this. There's so many ups and downs in leading any business. And certainly when you're dealing with so many people, this is a people business. The fundamental nature of the agency model is kind of labor arbitrage for the vast majority of agencies. And so you got a whole bunch of people who are servicing and a whole bunch of people who are buying from you. And you've got to be able to deal with the emotions and make sound decisions as you move through it. And part of dealing with the emotions and making sound decisions isn't deal with it doesn't mean, I think, what a lot of us think or might associate with it naturally, which is like stifle those and don't feel whatever. But it comes down to a lot of habits that we have around how we manage and engage with our own kind of emotional well-being. And so we do see a lot of burnout. And I've been in the agency space now for 12 years, serving agencies for the last decade. And whatever's happening in the market, like the percentage of folks who say they're burnt out tracks super well to, a ton of agencies started and grew a ton through COVID, and an awful lot of agencies shut down at the beginning of COVID. And if they'd held on a little bit longer, there was a kickback that was coming for them. But huge stress point in terms of what's happening. And we're seeing the same thing here over the last year. We've seen a lot of this is probably the second largest segment of agencies who've sold or shut down or sold at very low prices or shut down that I've seen over the last decade. And so a lot of that is just, I think you're like, how do you manage your own kind of well-being on all facets that contributes to a lot of the burnout.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think I think all three of you would probably agree with this. You've heard this, in leadership circles, is that the first step to leadership is learning your own self-leadership. And so taking care of yourself, managing your own time kind of dovetails into one of the things that you need to do as an agency leader is be able to either yourself or through your team get effective at time and resource management. So one of the things we noticed is that a lot of agencies are struggling to optimize their client work, with 52% of agencies struggling to hit billable utilization benchmarks over 15%, and just 18%, as we see here, always reach their billable versus non-billable time targets. Susan, as we kind of get into the data again here, your team leading this report, I'd love to get your thoughts on this one to kick off the next section.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this will kill an agency, right? If you are not hitting sort of benchmark for billable tasks, which should be about 75%, and then utilization, what percentage of those hours are actually getting billed to the client, accounting for everything else? Man, your profitability is really hard to maintain. We've got some really great feedback in the report from Drew McClellan, who runs Agency Management Institute, about why these benchmarks are the way they are and why they're so important. And, the fascinating thing, if you look at the next chart, Logan, is that even the people who are setting benchmarks in their agencies often are not meeting them. So this is a chronic problem in the business. And I think that there are folks certainly in this study, who say they're not tracking these rates at all. But the majority are and not hitting them. So, man, can this make the difference between a successful agency and one that's really struggling?
Susan and Nicole, does that, so 7% say we don't track our average bill utilization rate?
Yeah.
And I read that and I was like, no, that is 100% not true. Does that track? So I know you did the study and there's a ton of respondents, but does that track with your day-to-day experience? Or does that seem
Yeah, it does. It's interesting because when I'm in workshops around managing financials for agencies, there's a surprising number of agencies that don't have this calculation going in their metrics. They're just not tracking it. Agencies don't run like other kinds of businesses. So if you're not paying attention to AGI and utilization and stuff like that, you're going to be in real trouble. And the interesting thing, Gray, is it's not just you might assume that it's the little agencies that are having this problem. It is not. It's across sizes. So like a lot of other things in the study, it's more about how attentive you are to your systems and your metrics and the kinds of things you're tracking than it is about how big your staff is.
Yeah. Nicole, do you like what percentage of agencies you interact with actually know? If you just asked them today, right now, what percent, what's your utilization rate? How many people know that?
Very few. Honestly, I when I interact with people, some agency owners, and maybe this speaks to the maturity of businesses or maturity of business processes or deprioritizing this information, they generally don't merge their like time tracking in their task management system really well, not into any sort of reliable, way of really tracking the difference between when they're doing internal work and external work or whatnot. But even to the point where some business owners are finding pride in charging based on a model that doesn't require them to have to track time, like a
Right.
value
Project based.
almost like being proud that they no longer have to track time, which I think we three, four, five, all of us running this panel know that tracking time is sort of the bloodline of an agency. Even if you don't build
Feel that
line
way.
time, you need to understand how your product is performing. And so it is quite interesting. The people I interact with very informally, my social networks, like there is a group of people who find some pride in that in a sense, almost like a movement. And I don't know where it's coming from. I don't know if it's because it's a crutch because you're overwhelmed in other tools and systems. I don't know if it's an immaturity on knowing how to run a business. 2021 set a benchmark for all of us that is unattainable ever again for the rest of our lives. So it is interesting. And I wonder, Gray, as people go seeking your help, are they the category of people who are like ready to fix it? So they're ready to go that route? Because I talk to a lot of people who almost are in a counter movement, like they don't want to do it. It's almost as if they think it's poor culture for their agency, for their workers, for the people involved. They want unlimited PTO and they want unlimited autonomy and unlimited freedom. But unfortunately, it just eats into your margins, and you never know why.
Yeah. So I 100% agree with you in terms of most folks probably don't know their utilization rate like off the top of their head. And there's a wide gap there between the teams that are sub 30. So an agency in that, 10 to 30 person, the majority of them don't have that metric. Some of them do. And as you get larger than that, especially 50 plus, very few agencies get there without having figured that out and knowing what utilization looks like. But there's certainly a misperception that what I want, I'm the type of person who's unemployable and I want the autonomy. I don't want anybody to tell me what to do. So I'm going to start an agency that everybody who I'm going to hire wants the same things that I want. And it's just not realizing what other folks want. And the fact that we all hate time tracking is because most people don't get any benefit from it. That utilization rate, Susan, what you were saying, hey, there's some target around utilization. Like one finer point there is totally fine with a lower utilization target. You have to understand what your delivery margin is, which for most teams is the gap between what's your average cost, billable rate per hour to a client. Not that you necessarily charge by the hour, but what's your average billable rate per hour? And what's your average labor rate per hour? And the larger that gap is, so the higher your delivery margin is, the lower our utilization can be, and we can still be profitable. And that's going to demand some kind of leverage and expertise from somewhere else. So we need to understand the relationship between those two. But yeah, there's got to be some benefit that comes from time tracking. Hey, if I'm going to ask you to time track, I'm going to ask you to estimate your time, then I'm also going to commit to you that I'm not going to consistently load you up. And if I see you've got 48 hours on your plate every week, that's not going to keep coming. There's going to be a change that comes from that. And there's going to be a change to how we package and price once we look at profitability. So there's got to be the upside to time tracking and time management. Otherwise, why would anybody do it?
Yeah, utilization has a direct tie into the AGI, adjusted gross income, that an agency has to work with. And I loved your point about average billable rate. Drew McClellan has been for quite a few years talking about 150 as an ideal target. It's up to 175 now because of increased, rates for team members that are qualified, et cetera. So those numbers are really important. That gives you the money you need to work with.
Well, and it's interesting because I have a note here, 23% of respondents don't know their AGI. So not only do they not know what they're billing, they don't really effectively know how much they're making.
Yeah. It's really challenging to run an agency like that. And I think you're right, Nicole. A lot of us sort of fall into the trap of saying, well, we don't charge that way. We're project based. But man, if you're not tracking some of these metrics behind, you really do not know how much of what you're charging you actually have to work with and run the agency. And then, obviously pass on to profit, and for incentives and all of those kinds of things that happen in an agency. So, yeah,
Mm.
it's a big problem.
Time tracking is not just about billing. Gray, you mentioned something that Marcel Petipa from Parakeeto has mentioned on this series before, that you've got to position the benefit to your employees of time tracking. And you've also got to understand that it's not always just tied to how you bill the client. I think those are two big mistakes. Just kind of looking at it, or at least letting your team think it's a micromanagement tactic, and letting yourself think that it's just a billing mechanism for your clients. If you do away with kind of those two myths, then you realize the impact and what can happen when you actually do have a handle on those numbers. A couple of things here. We had a few questions come in. David Sly had a good just comment and offer to support other agencies here in how he's refined his services, going back to that positioning, and being able to retain clients based on customized services for solving a specific problem that they've told you that they have, not that you just think you can deliver well. And then one other question I wanted to answer live from Greg: what percentage of agencies do not track time? Very much in line with the rest of this conversation. Our research found that 23% of agencies
23,
don't. Yeah. Yeah. Just mind blowing. I think Nicole even
23%.
grabbed that stat.
And
Yes.
it's all of the segments. It's not just the overwhelmed who are in
Interesting.
that percentage.
Okay.
It's everybody at the same rate. When
Okay.
we look at number of employees, we see very consistent numbers. Most of, for 39% of the agencies with fewer than 10, to your point, Greg, are not doing this. But we see sizable percentages of even bigger agencies. So I don't
Mhm.
know how they keep the lights on.
Right, right. Awesome. Well, thank you, David, Greg. Meredith's got a question in there. Again, if you've got a question, use that question section, the Q&A at the bottom of the Zoom toolbar there. Drop your questions in, and we'll have some time towards the end. Our next section, number 3, was about budgeting and profitability. So a couple of things here. Client over-servicing is happening a ton. 38% of agencies struggle with frequently over-servicing clients. As someone who oversaw a customer experience team within an agency for a bit, my heart went out. I recognize this challenge. And so let's talk a little bit about the over servicing piece. Nicole, you've mentioned kind of the pressure from the client side and the talent side. So maybe we could kick this one off with you as well.
Yeah, no, I actually have a stat for this, and I calculated that 30% of respondents didn't charge for discovery, don't offer discovery, don't know the discovery, and this like journey of not knowing how much you make, not tracking your time around it, and it resulting in over servicing is sort of like being created for us, where individuals, I think, is such a big group, are not even caring enough to put a price on or do something at the beginning stages of a relationship. They're sort of setting the tone, I think, later on in the relationship. And so not only have we always had pressures, I think, to deliver more value to our clients, now we're sort of devaluing ourselves so early on. And I think what's interesting, because it's happened with some of my team before, and I've had to work with them on it, over servicing doesn't necessarily mean delivering more value, because a lot of time I think we try to over
Mm,
service based on what we think the client needs. Kind of what Gray was saying, like as owners or managers, we might be delivering an environment to our employees that we want, but that's actually not what they want. They don't find value. So we're giving all this extra, we're feeling unappreciated as managers and owners. The same thing is now happening with our clients. There's sort of like a misalignment where we're like, oh, we gave you so much extra. We gave you 12 apples and you're like, well, I only wanted one apple. Now, if you gave me a banana and a watermelon, I could have made a fruit salad. And it's like, the issue is we're either there's a lack of communication, there's a fear to just have a discussion. Alignment is something that we're not seeking to do, but over servicing doesn't mean happy clients. And I think that's a part of the problem where we're over servicing, but we're sort of not getting maybe what we historically would get back as a feedback loop. And I don't know, Susan, if you are experiencing the same thing with your clients. I know you have a different type of clientele. maybe you're seeing something different?
I think it's a huge problem. And again, it ties back to, profitability. So it has tremendous impact when you do this. It was really interesting to see these results because we have another study that we do every year, the agency audit with agency leaders and the challenges that they're experiencing. And a huge percent of the big three, right, are one of them is clients don't understand how much we're doing for them. It's a lack of communication that's happening between the agency and the client. The agency isn't good at reporting all of the work that's going into what's accomplished. So the client, is diminishing the value of the dollar that they're spending. And then we get into this over servicing thing where the client doesn't see it. The agency feels like they're over servicing and it's a communication problem. We are, I think, as you know, a teamwork agency. And one of the things that's been really fascinating for us is to have our clients in teamwork in our projects, because then they see the amount of work that's going on behind the scenes and we don't have those kinds of issues. So I think, yeah, over servicing just costs everybody money. And to your point, we've all had that conversation with clients where you're like, hey, we kind of overdid it and we need some more money. That conversation is never fun, whether you're having it in the middle of a project or 3 months later, which is more likely when you sort of recapped and done all your calculations and went, oh, we lost a lot of money on that. You're not going back to the client. At that point, they've got their deliverable. Nobody wants to have that conversation. So a lot of this is about, I think, communication, to your point, understanding the metrics inside your agency so that you don't get ahead of your skis, and also really good communication with the client throughout so that they understand the work it takes to get what you are delivering to them.
Susan, I love that so much. And great, kind of ties into the mantra you guys have at ZenPilot around people, processes, and tools. It's not just about the tool to be operationally efficient. And I saw this with younger account managers within an agency who did what Nicole was saying. They wanted to serve the client well, and they didn't want to have that hard conversation. Maybe they weren't experienced enough in their career. Maybe we didn't train them well enough, right? And so they're doing more. The client doesn't realize that they're doing more that's out of scope. And then so they're feeling more burnt out. The client isn't feeling any more satisfied. So from a training, from a people perspective, the habits that you guys talk about a ton, anything you would advise agency owners on as we kind of keep pulling on this thread that Nicole and Susan started here?
I think all the advice has been good, but I would actually take a slightly contrarian point of view here,
Oh,
which is like
okay.
the easy thing to do is sit here and be like, hey, nobody should be over servicing anybody. That's like bad agency, stop. I actually think you should be able to make decisions. You should have visibility and metrics into what that delivery margin looks like and your profitability across 3 main vectors, your clients. So individual clients or project by project would be the next level breakdown of that. Your service lines. So, hey, we make more money when we do web design than when we do organic social. And then by your team, which then breaks down into individual users. And I think there's cases where, for strategic reasons, you're fine over servicing someone. I don't think that should ever be the standard. I think you set really poor expectations. And there's a lot of built up bitterness and animosity and resentment that happens when an agency feels like, hey, we're going above and beyond for this client. And they're no more grateful. Nothing changes to your point, Nicole, about overservicing does not usually lead to better results. Alignment around value and consistently setting and meeting expectations leads to better results. But I do think there's cases where knowing those numbers, you're fine to make a strategic decision to over deliver for somebody. But to your points, both Nicole and Susan, that shouldn't be done in a black box or, hey, surprise, we did this stuff for you. It should be, hey, we're going to go above and beyond here in this case. Here's why we're not going to charge you for this, or here's why this is going to be less expensive than what it would have been. We're communicating to people what we're doing. And there's definitely cases where that makes sense. And as an agency owner, I think you got the autonomy and some flexibility to decide when that can happen. But you need to know, what does that mean for our overall profitability? So I think there's some nuance there around overservicing, where I would actually say for most agencies, there's some case it's a key client or it's a relationship that I want to help out or support in some way, where we should technically like overservice compared to our average, but that should be an intentional decision instead of what you indicated, Logan, a second ago with your experience with account managers. usually an accidental decision that you find out about later. And I didn't even realize we were doing all this extra stuff for them. Why did we do that? Did we tell them about that? Nope, we didn't. And are they happier? Nope, they're not. We're just trying to keep the account. And, it's a desperation and kind of hidden move instead of an upfront intentional move.
Totally agree with that, Gray. Great nuance there. Yeah.
I love it. What is a good roundtable without a little pushback, little nuance to the discussion there? And what I heard you saying there, Gray, was, it's not just necessarily over servicing, but it's almost giving your team, here's kind of visibility into the margin, into the wiggle room that we have, and giving them a framework for making those decisions, and giving them the training on how do we communicate about that, right? When you hit that fork in the road and you make that decision based on the framework we've given you from leadership, how do you communicate about that to the client? I think a lot of that just we kind of let happen. And again, as Susan hit on earlier, agency work, agency as a business are very different than other businesses where you don't have the nuances of client work that you have to think about, you have to prepare for. Otherwise, you're left just reacting to them. To Gray's point there about being reactive versus proactive in this area. So the last section we want to touch on here for the next 10 minutes before we get to our 10-minute Q&A. Everybody, there are great comments and questions coming in the chat. We'll try and grab those from the chat as well. But if you have one, use that Q&A section on the bar. That'll make sure that it's really easy for the panelists to be able to answer those as we round out the conversation today. One bright spot, I'll just touch on this real quick. 38% of agencies felt confident in increasing profitability in the next 12 months. 38 felt very confident. 21% felt extremely confident. So I just wanted to touch on this, that it's not all doom and gloom. It's not all clients leaving. It's not all just burnout. This group is very resilient. And I think they're, again, going along with the theme today, there's some interesting things when you look at the mindset of agency owners, of the folks of you who are on here today, asking great questions, contributing to others in the community. That is really encouraging. So I just wanted to call that out before we get into the last section.
And I should say, Logan,
Go
if
ahead,
you
Susan.
don't mind, this is consistent across all of those segments. We see
Right.
the same numbers among overwhelmed, confident, edging out a little bit because they're confident. But even the overwhelmed, it's about half that are saying, things are going to be better next year. And I love that stat.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Thank you for that. Definitely interrupt me anytime. You guys are delivering some great value. Technology and innovation. Guess what? AI is the topic on the slide for any of you who were at Inbound, like Gray and Nicole and myself and the rest of the teamwork.com team. It seems like there were two things that were talked about consistently: HubSpot moving up market, taking on Salesforce, and artificial intelligence or AI. So Susan, I'd love to kick it off with you. Some of the stats here about the approach and, again, the attitudes towards AI among the agency leaders that were polled here.
Yeah. Lot of embracing of AI on this. And I think it's really driven by the fact that our clients are asking about it, and our clients are looking to us to lead in terms of new technology and techniques that they can use in their marketing. A high percentage of our respondents believe that clients want us to be using these type of technologies inside the agency as well to gain efficiencies and sort of model how these things can be used in marketing. So almost all of our agencies embrace AI as something worthwhile pursuing, something they're looking at, not just to become experienced for client work, but also to improve agency operations. So a lot of embracing, probably some push from the outside, and a lot of interest coming just operationally about the potential benefit of AI. Nicole, what do you think?
No, I agree. And it's interesting because I think my group, my circles, and the people I speak with do look to AI to possibly help alleviate almost all the things that we've been talking about: time tracking and utilization and serving up insights that help us better run our business so we don't have to be these brilliant analysts who know every element of our business. I mean, 23% of people not knowing their AGI. Well, if their systems just said, well, here's your AGI in a really simple way, or warn you or triggered you, hey, this is going below an average or something. I can see it being very beneficial. I think we have a lot of creative agencies or a lot of marketing agencies. And yes, AI, I think, can help you deliver your product better. It could help you transform it. But I think in my circles, when we look at AI, we're looking at it to help us actually run our businesses better somehow, somewhere,
Mm.
without having to be a business intelligence master in these tools. Can we have these tools that already know what to look at? Like we have this benchmark report. Can this benchmark report then be viewed and analyzed by experts? Could algorithms be created? And could that be infused into our systems to help warn us and tell us what to do? Like at some point, there has to be tools that really just help us run our business versus only help us deliver our services. And so I think that's that hopeful group that are like, hopefully these tools actually help us make money and in addition to serving our clients and delivering the products well.
Yeah, Nicole, I feel like most of the conversations I'm having, so I'm glad that you're having those conversations because most of the agencies I'm talking to are looking at it from like the generative AI tool perspectives. Like, how can this write copy or create graphics or, automate some of the actual client delivery work? And I'm actually at least as excited, but probably more excited because this is, confirmation bias. Guess what? I'm a nerd. I like data. So I'm excited for how AI can help us process data and make better decisions about how to run a business, how to staff, who on what project, and what are the commonalities, and do a lot of the pattern matching that that is like the core construct of what we call intelligence. AI can make that a lot faster, probably a lot better, and a lot more efficient, and take some of our biases out of the equation. Hopefully, I'm sure there'll be all kinds of challenges as we do that. Um, and so I think you got what's interesting here is the folks who answered that AI is a threat. That was an interesting one, but I totally get how depending on your perspective looking at it. I haven't viewed it that way, and I was trying to question it and say like, oh, these people who just don't, they don't like whatever's new. But actually, totally get it. The AI is a big threat to a lot of non-differentiated agencies who are doing really basic level stuff. It's going to replace a good chunk of that, as at least half of the people think will happen here at some point in time. So, Logan, I don't know what your conversations have been like with folks in the AI space, but it's super exciting to me.
Hmm. Yeah. So a couple of things that have come up just in the chat as you guys have been talking. I love the way that Greg put it, kind of summing up what Nicole said. AI is great for the work about the work. So kind of expanding our thinking here, especially if you are a marketing agency, a lot of the talk, as Gray and Nicole have been mentioning, has been around generative AI on producing content, those sorts of things. And that was definitely there in a lot of what HubSpot shared at Inbound, the campaign creator and some of those things. David Sly brought up AI sourcing and creating imagery. I keep forgetting the AI tool. Somebody remind me in the chat, what's the AI tool everybody's been talking about to generate images? Midjourney, I think, is the one. There might be another one as well. So I'm hearing talk about that. One question I had, Susan, if do you know from the research if this breakdown was any different for marketing agencies versus other type of agencies of web development, creative, ad agencies, or just anything that you're hearing as it pertains to AI across different types of agencies and the work that they're doing?
I will answer that question for you in 2 minutes.
I love it. I love it.
Good AI, you could answer it in like 10 seconds. So
Yeah.
we're getting there.
Yeah,
Midjourney, Meg.
that's probably true. I do know that. I do know that what we saw is that confidence segment is much more likely to be embracing this full bore than anybody else is.
Okay.
They are absolutely going hell bent for leather in
Mhm.
this direction, where everybody else is sort of. And I understand that we do have folks who are like, you know what, we'll use what we feel safe with, but until a client makes us, we're going to be a little bit more conservative. But that confident group really believes that their clients do have an expectation that these kinds of technologies will be on board, both for the agency and for the work that they're doing with clients.
Mhm. I think one thing I heard this from another one of our teamwork.com partners, Shauna Knuckles at Advocation. She came up through PR agencies. Now they do a lot of consulting with agencies similar to the three of you here. And one piece of advice that she gave in looking at this report was, whatever your stance, be clear about your communication to clients about what that stance is, because that's what's going to rub clients the wrong way or make them feel like, you're maybe not with it. Regardless of where you stand, we're fully embracing it. We're waiting and seeing whatever. Make sure that your team knows where you stand and how you want to communicate about that to clients, because they're gonna ask those questions.
For sure.
So I
Logan, I
think,
have your answer. So
oh, sweet.
we
That was
asked
under
folks
2 minutes, Susan. That was really good.
we asked folks in the study what kinds of things their agency offers, and obviously this is a choose all that apply, right? But I think most of the assumptions out there would be that folks doing web dev as a core aspect of their agency might be more on board with AI than folks who are not. In fact, it's very close. 55% of the folks doing web dev have this like AI is the future perspective, and we're going for it. 46% of those who don't have. So it doesn't appear to be something that's really divisive based on whether you're a digital agency or more traditional services.
Hmm. Love it. Well, I appreciate all the questions that everybody has dropped in so far. We've got several in here as we round out the last 10 minutes, and then let you know where you can get access to this report. But one of the first questions here was actually on our last segment on AI and technology. This was an anonymous question. What non-generative AI tools are you seeing the most implemented or discussed? Nicole Gray, I thought maybe one of you might have some thoughts on this one.
Yeah. So I'm seeing a lot of folks who are like tying into different LLMs in like just making their own. I got a good friend named Louis Schulman, who's building on top of his own, basically ingesting a bunch of data from company Slack, email, Zoom recordings and transcripts, and basically building on top of other platforms their own LLM for teams. They're doing it with larger teams right now, but at some point trying to do that and roll it out to the agency space. So it's mostly like other applications where there's some coding and product development involved that I'm seeing right now.
Mhm. Yeah, that aligns with what Susan shared there. Nicole, any other thoughts there as you were mentioning non-generative coming up in conversations with some of your peers?
I don't know about non-generative and generative AI. I'm not an expert, but an AI
Me
tool
either.
that I'm hearing a lot about is Jasper, which can do content, which can do images. I think for marketing agencies, it seems to be a really popular tool. And I'm seeing a lot of my peers and clients and people I'm collaborating with becoming a partner of that tool, really seeing that that tool can help incorporate like easier ways to deliver on their services. HubSpot, you mentioned, has a lot of that, but anyone who's not operating within HubSpot, there's other tools that are out there. What's interesting also, actually, I'm going to loop back to some of the discussions around talking to your clients about it. I'm seeing a lot of my peers actually putting into their contracts, right? You accept that we will use AI in this way. Maybe it's for ideation, maybe it's for editing, but some of these agencies are getting very clear on when these tools come into play. That way, there's no question about it. You sign this agreement, you let us put your data into this tool.
The data
And-
privacy is a good point there too, Nicole, just to cover yourself as an agency. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, and also, some of the tools are questionable in terms of if we put in information and it's going to spit out the information. So tools where you put in data and it cleans it up, or tools where
Mhm.
you know, put in proprietary information and then it analyzes it for you. So I think the agencies are embracing it, but I think also clients are sort of like they like the concept. They want you to use it if it makes you efficient, but they don't want to use it if there's any sort of security issues. And
Mhm.
so I think we're going to see more and more contracts and master service agreements that have this language in it. Like, here's our tool stack, where historically it didn't quite matter what tool you used to get the job done. It also
Right.
didn't really matter what process you used to get the job done. I think now I'm noticing clients are being a little bit more nosy because they do care if you're efficient. They do care if you're billing them for things that they, in their opinion, don't think they should be billed for because you're not doing a great job. And and the teams of people who are inviting their clients into their systems, right, are sort of like revealing that. And if you perfected that relationship of a client in your systems and processes, you've probably been a little bit more efficient. But now when your clients are demanding to see like what's under the hood, what's going on, are we really spending our time in the right places? That's a tough one.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
they want to see our tools, they want to see our processes. It's a new way of doing business. It's more collaborative than I think a lot of agencies are used to.
For sure. The other section that we spent a good bit of time on was on time tracking and utilization rates. So, Gray and Susan, I want to have you guys lead off with this one. Great question from Steve Kozel. Steve, if I pronounce your last name wrong, please forgive me. But Steve says time tracking, whether as a mechanism for billing, as we talked about, or simply resource and utilization and staffing, still underscores time as an increment of work, not the quality or value generated in that time. Agencies haven't historically been incentivized for efficiency. New tools like AI and automation make more components of work happen much faster, as we've been talking about here, doing more with less time. What does all this mean for the future of value in resourcing agency work? Gray, Susan, I'd love to have you guys comment on this one.
Yeah, Susan, you want to kick us off?
Yeah, I mean, the reality is your agency is making money on the time spent by your team. Whether you are paying that team hourly like a subcontractor, whether you are paying them, a regular salary, it breaks down to an hourly cost for you in terms of having people be able to work 40 hours a week. So you do have to understand where the money that's coming in is going, and that's where it's valuable. But I also agree 100% with Nicole about things changing in terms of how people perceive our value, and that's why agencies really need to start charging based on expertise. Because even then, if your client sees you're doing things faster, better, whatever, you don't lose your value in their mind. You do not want your value as an agency associated with the hours that your butt's in the chair or your team's is. It's just not. So we really got to stop, even though we can use that tracking internally to measure our profitability and manage it when we're doing proposals or answering RFPs or whatever we want to do. You've got to start getting your clients on board with hiring you for your expertise and not your hours. That'd be my 2 cents. What do you think, Ray?
I don't know if I'd add a ton to that. I do think that's where the relationship between your utilization rate and your delivery margin becomes super critical, because what AI should do is be able to increase our delivery margin. And AI is also going to diminish utilization for a while until agencies figure that out. So to me personally, I don't feel any sort of moral obligation that if I'm using AI to do something in half the time and the client is happy with the outcome, that I need to charge, half the price for that. What will happen though from the markets is that I'm going to get outcompeted at some point in time, because once other people start taking advantage of the same efficiencies. So it's going to push us down this. How can we go find better outcomes in faster time to try to continue to grab margin? And ultimately clients will benefit from that. So there's some, line where we can make great margins for some period of time and then go out of business when everybody leaves, or, we're kind of too far behind. And so I believe more in like the market model of what's going to happen here than that we owe anything to clients in terms of reduced prices because we're generating more efficiency on the back end. So 100% it boils down to what's the value that we're providing and how do we get there. And we're going to see, utilization rates go down because we're investing in more tech-enabled solutions. That means more R&D time, more costs that we're footing. To your point, like every hour has a cost, whether it's going to client work or not going to client work.
Absolutely. Greg, really appreciate all your engagement today. He said, if you sketch a solution at a coffee meeting, is it worth less? Right? Is it worth less because that idea is on the napkin versus in a slick PowerPoint? No, it's about the ideas and the expertise and the results that you deliver. For anybody who saw me kind of wandering around as Susan and Gray were talking, it's not because they weren't dropping great nuggets of wisdom, but I was going to grab this book that was recommended to me at Inbound, and I picked up The Secret Tradecraft of Elite Advisors from David C. Baker. I've talked to some other agency owners who have been reading this. It's fairly short, it's a quick little read, but I think this is very much in line with charging for your expertise, positioning yourself as an expert, using time tracking to understand your utilization rates, your profitability, to determine that on the back end, but positioning yourself as the elite advisor I think that is a great resource. So with that, we are at the top of the hour. So we want to let you know a few things from here. If you dropped a question that we didn't get answered, we'll do our best to follow up via email with you. Everyone, even if you didn't ask a question, you will get a copy of this recording as well as the deck. The other resource we obviously want to point out is get access to this full report. So we'll drop the link in the chat here. It'll also be linked in the deck. If one of our panelists from the Teamwork side could drop that in the chat. The link to the full report. As we're doing that, Susan, Gray, Nicole, what's the best way for folks to stay connected with each of you?
So Susan at audienceaudit.com. If you have questions about the study or how it worked or anything like that, or just about agency thought leadership, how you get to a point where you can develop your expertise, Susan at audienceaudit.com is a great way to get hold of me. Get rid of me. Get hold of me.
No one wants to get rid of you, honestly.
For me, LinkedIn. Find me on LinkedIn. I tell people if you send me a DM on LinkedIn, you'll get a hold of me faster than sending an email to my inbox. So I'm very active.
I can attest to that. She's telling the truth, y'all. Great.
Yeah. I just put my email in the chat here. If anyone's got direct questions, feel free to reach out. But zenpilot.com is the website. You're welcome to book a call there. Or if you got quick questions, shoot me a note, Gray, Gray, at zenpilot.com.
I love it. Well, thank you, all three of you, for your insights, for the work that you do in and around this community. Thank you for everyone for joining today. We did drop that link to the report. Again, you'll get a link to this recording, the deck, and the report if you were registered and you were able to, whether you were able to attend live or not. Whether you're live or watching this on demand, at least right now, you can go to teamwork.com/agencylife and the report is there right at the top. You can also find our other on-demand webinars. For instance, we mentioned Marcel Petitpas, who was on another roundtable like this one. We were talking about the myth of value-based pricing and some of the things that we touched on here today. And as some of you have mentioned, thank you for checking out the weekly podcast. So if you don't like waiting a month to have these sorts of conversations, they're not live, they're not interactive, but you can get some great stuff from other agency owners and consultants that we're featuring each and every week that drops Thursday on Agency Life, wherever you get your podcast. So with that, thank you to all of our panelists. Thank you to everyone who contributed to the report. And hopefully you all found this valuable. Thanks for all the great questions. We will see you next month. Thanks, everybody.